In the mirrored hush of the Whitney's fourth-floor gallery, Mara Ellison walked into her ex-husband's laughter like broken glass. Gavin Darden stood beneath a Calder mobile, his new girlfriend, Sloane Ryder, leaning into him with a smile sharp enough to slice ribbon. "Look who dressed herself," Sloane said, lifting her flute. "Charity chic." Cameras drifted, whispers followed. Mara smiled because that was the only shield she had left. Then the crowd shifted, and a man she'd only seen in headlines, Arjun Mehta, the private, impossible billionaire, stepped from the periphery. He didn't ask if she needed saving. He simply offered a hand. "Dance," he said. Mara Ellison used to measure her life by calendars, project deadlines, meetings, anniversaries, the neat click of events lining up like train cars. After the divorce, time had the elastic cruelty of a rubber band. Some days snapped, some stretched and sagged. On the morning of the gala, her best friend Nora called while Mara was wrestling a flyer printer in the office of Haven House, the tiny non-profit she'd built to convert empty rooms in city buildings into quiet recovery spaces for overwhelmed students and overworked staff. "You're going," Nora said, dispensing with hello. "I procured a ticket. It's the Hudson Arts Endowment Gala, and your name will be on the list." "Nora," Mara sighed. The printer gulped the corner of a page and died dramatically. "I have a budget meeting at 8 tomorrow. My board wants answers. Donations are down." Maybe because certain donors were captured by a more entertaining narrative. Nora's voice dipped. "Attend. Smile at the right people. Remind them your work still exists. And yes, you look phenomenal in that sea-glass dress." Mara glanced at the garment bag hanging off a bookshelf. She'd bought the dress back when optimism felt like income. "You know Gavin will be there, and Sloane." "I do," Nora said. "Consider it exposure therapy." Exposure to what? The exposure of having chosen the wrong person, of not noticing the fault lines beneath love until the house collapsed. Gavin had been the golden son of a family that moved inside Manhattan the way others moved through their own kitchens, effortlessly, casually, everything within reach. When he'd fallen in love with her at an East Village readings night, he'd seemed awed by her work ethic, her weirdness. Later, he'd called it her lack of polish. It still stung, how something cherished could be renamed into a wound. Sloane had entered the picture with wet lacquer nails and a certain kind of beauty that asked to be used. In the early days, Mara had dismissed the threat. She and Gavin were married. The rest was background noise. But background noise can swell, fill a room, drown a voice. Mara flattened her palms on the desk. The printer made a death rattle. She laughed, despite herself. "Fine," she told Nora. "Send the receipt to the email. We can pretend it's a networking expense." "Pretending is how great stories begin," Nora replied. "And sweetheart, don't let them write yours." Evening fell with theatrical punctuality, tinting the Hudson the color of bruised violets. In her apartment on Orchard Street, Mara zipped the sea-glass dress and studied herself. Her hair was a dark chestnut bob now. She'd cut it short after the divorce. She swiped on lipstick with a hand that trembled, then steadied. She was 34. Not old enough to feel exhausted by reinvention, and yet, on her way out, she paused beside the stack of grant applications and the sinking number on her non-profit's bank app. Gavin's law firm handled major donors who'd once supported Haven House. After the divorce, emails went unanswered, calls politely deflected. She had told herself she didn't believe in conspiracies. Lately she wasn't sure. She tucked her phone into a small clutch. The car Nora sent slid along Houston and North through avenues that still smelled like summer. When she stepped into the Whitney's lobby, the evening air cooled her cheeks. Light flooded the stairs like poured champagne. She told herself to breathe. The staffer at the desk checked the list and smiled professionally. "Welcome." Mara nodded and climbed toward music that sounded like polite success. The fourth-floor gallery gleamed in pale concrete and glass. Waiters navigated with trays. The city outside glittered with the smug indifference of skyscrapers. That was when she saw them, Gavin in a tux that fit like a threat, and Sloane in a black dress that seemed less worn than wielded. They looked carved from comfort, Gavin's hair sun-touched and disciplined, Sloane's smile all calculation. Mara felt the old reflex to retreat. She stood taller instead. She would not be precious tonight. She would simply be present. Gavin noticed her first. "Mara," he said loud enough that nearby heads tilted. He used the tone he saved for settlement offers he intended to win. "You look different." "Different can be good," Mara said, and let a waiter place a flute in her hand. It steadied her grip. She didn't plan to drink. She needed the prop. Sloane slid into the space between them with predatory grace. "I almost didn't recognize you," she said. "The haircut is brave." "Brave is walking into a room where you're unwelcome," Mara replied. She softened the edges with a smile. "But they let me in anyway, so—" Sloane blinked. Gavin's mouth twitched, the ghost of admiration he used to wear. Mara looked away before the memory could bloom into something that hurt. "We were just discussing Haven House," Gavin said. "My mother brought it up over dinner. She worries about you, says you've got a habit of taking on too much." "Eleanor always did love a hobby," Mara said. She shouldn't have. She did anyway. Sloane's laugh tinkled like a fake bell. "Relax," Sloane murmured. "We're all friends. You know, I admire your passion, but scale matters. If you're not growing, you're dying." She sipped. "Donors need confidence." Mara felt the words like fingers on a bruise. Confidence, as if she had fed on it carelessly and now deserved hunger. She thought of the spreadsheets in her office, the messages from school counselors who told her the quiet rooms had stopped a fight, a panic attack, a dropout, small victories that wouldn't fit on a Gala placard. "Scale matters," Mara said softly. "So do the people inside the numbers." "That's sweet," Sloane replied. "But outcomes matter most. And, well," she tilted her head toward Gavin, "some of us are good at outcomes." Laughter pin-pricked along the knot of attendees eavesdropping in that way Manhattan made into a sport, listening without appearing to. Mara swallowed what she wanted to say. Not here. Not where cameras might catch her mouth forming something unforgivable. Her cheeks flamed. She stared past Sloane at the sculpture above, wire floating like impossible residue of movement. Maybe that was what she'd been after, the shape of what remained, disciplined into art. "Mara!" Gavin placed a hand on her elbow, the gesture so familiar that her bones remembered. "This isn't personal." "Everything is personal," she said, and stepped back. His hand dropped. He and Sloane exchanged a look, amusement, pity, triumph, and something inside Mara tightened into quiet rage. Then the crowd shifted, and the air shifted with it, as if someone had opened a window. Arjun Mehta approached without entourage or announcement. He was taller than newspapers suggested. Dark hair neatly cut, jaw serious in the way of people who spend more time solving than speaking. He wore a tuxedo that didn't wear him, and he moved like someone who belonged anywhere he decided to stand. "Excuse me," he said to no one in particular, his voice low but certain. His gaze touched Mara's and stayed. "I'm told this is where the most interesting conversation is happening." Sloane straightened. Cameras behind her woke like flowers to the sun. "Mr. Mehta," she began, hand outstretched. "Sloane." "Ryder," Arjun said, not taking her hand. He nodded. "We've met." He turned to Mara and did something both old-fashioned and unscripted. He bowed slightly, palm open, as if inviting an alternate narrative to join the room. "Will you dance?" he asked. Mara stared. She couldn't pass the impulse, chivalry, strategy, or simple human decency. She looked at Gavin, whose expression had become a locked door. She looked at the watchers, bent toward the potential of spectacle. Mara placed her fingers in Arjun's palm. Music unfurled from the speakers, a slow tune with echoes of something French. He led with ease that didn't announce itself. She followed because her feet remembered how. "I'm Arjun," he said softly as they drifted into the cleared space. "You looked like you could use a hand." "You looked like you wanted a headline," she replied before she could edit herself. His mouth curved. "Sometimes two truths learn to share the same sentence," he said. "I saw a woman holding her ground. I like to stand beside people who do that." Mara made herself breathe. "I'm not a project." "Good," he said. "I don't invest in projects. I invest in people." Over his shoulder, she caught Sloane's startled mouth and Gavin's working jaw. Heat rose again, but this time it felt like power decanting into her limbs. "Then invest in a conversation," she said. "Why did you choose this moment?" He didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Because this room respects a show of force. Because I'm tired of watching the wrong people get the microphone. And because I hoped you'd let me." "Maybe I will," she said, surprising herself. "For one song." "Then let's not waste it," Arjun murmured, and together they turned until the sculpture above spun slowly in their wake. They finished the dance to polite applause and the brief strobe of flashbulbs. Arjun stepped back first, freeing her hand. "Thank you," Mara said, "for the diversion. It was useful." "I prefer necessary." He retrieved 2 waters from a passing tray and handed her one. "I took a risk. You have every right to be angry." "I'm not angry," she lied. "You're wary," he corrected gently. "Good. Wary has kept more founders alive than optimism." "Founders," she repeated, rolling the word like a marble. "You know who I am." He smiled. "You think I walk into a gala without reading the room where my money might accidentally land? Haven House is a small miracle held together with tape and stubbornness." "That sounds like pity disguised as a compliment," she said. "It's respect disguised as humor," he replied. "You built something out of almost nothing. I relate." Mara studied him. Most billionaires she'd seen from afar wore wealth like a stage costume, sequins, feathers. Arjun wore it like a uniform, function over flourish. There were rumors. He'd slept on a co-founder's couch during his first acquisition. He'd coded the original product himself. He'd never forgiven himself for the hospital his rival's fund gutted in Queens. "I didn't dance with you for a check," she said, voice low, "and I won't be a photo on your philanthropy page." "Good," he said again. "Have dinner with me instead. My team wants to talk to you about a citywide initiative. Quiet rooms in schools, real ones, funded, trained, measured." Something in her chest lifted. Hope, fear. "Why me?" "Because you've done it already," Arjun said simply. "On a shoestring, because people trust you in rooms where my name makes people leave." He said it without self-pity. She believed him. "I'll consider it," she said, "after I survive this evening." "Then consider this a variable improved," he said. He slipped a card from an inner pocket, but not the glossy rectangle with gilded edges she expected. It was simple, Matt, his name and a phone number. "Text me when the worst part is over." "What makes you think this isn't the worst part?" she asked. He glanced over her shoulder. "Because I can see your ex-husband advancing like a weather system." Mara didn't turn. "I don't want to give them a second act." "Then let me give you an exit," Arjun said. "There's a utility staircase behind the Rothko. It leads to a terrace. Fresh air, no cameras." She hesitated. Every instinct insisted on finishing what pride had started, but Nora's voice chimed in her memory. "Don't let them write your story." "Lead the way," she said. They navigated through clusters of donors who parted without noticing themselves, emotion as ingrained as breath. Arjun nodded to a guard, who nodded back because money makes its own security. They slipped through an unmarked door and onto a narrow stairwell that smelled faintly of paint and lemon cleaner. On the terrace the city felt close enough to touch. Cars threaded down the West Side Highway. The river moved with an old muscle's patience. The wind lifted the hair at Mara's nape. It felt like permission. "I grew up in Jackson Heights," Arjun said suddenly, hands on the rail. "My mother taught high school chemistry. On her lunch break, she'd hide in the supply closet. Said the quiet saved her." "Mine was a library aide in Ohio," Mara said. "She used to shelve fiction when she was nervous. Said stories returned to their places without complaint." They stood in the kind of silence that's an agreement. "I have to go back in," Arjun said at last. "They'll notice and decide what I meant by leaving. I'll keep it boring." "Is that possible?" Mara asked. "You just choreographed a 12-second scandal." A flicker of amusement crossed his face. "Scandal is what rich people call surprise." He stepped backward toward the door. "Text me," he said. "Whatever you decide, text. I'm better with data than speculation." She lifted the card. "I will." When he was gone, she didn't rush to re-enter the fray. She allowed herself 5 minutes to breathe, to look at the city and remember that rooms were only rooms. Then she went back inside, chin high, spine long. Gavin and Sloane were nowhere in sight. Or perhaps she had learned to see around them. "Tell me everything." Nora's text arrived before Mara's lift turned east on Canal. Mara sent a photo of Arjun's card and waited for the typing bubble to pop in and out like a nervous heartbeat. Nora called. "You danced with him. People will faint at brunch." "It was one dance," Mara said. 1 minute of oxygen in a vacuum. He wants to meet about funding." "You're not allowed to dismiss oxygen," Nora said warmly. "Not when your board has panic written all over its minutes." Mara scrubbed a hand over her face. "We're losing 2 major donors this quarter. The third is re-evaluating focus, which is philanthropy for we're bored." "Gavin," Nora said, not a question. "I can't prove it, but ever since the divorce," Mara watched neon smear the window, "calls drop, invitations don't arrive, introductions grow teeth." "Then stop asking for permission," Nora said. "Find new rooms." "I found one," Mara said, thumb pressed to the mat card like a talisman. "I just don't know if he's bringing chairs or chains." Nora was quiet. "Arjun Mehta has his own weather, but he knows what it is to want something no one else can see yet. That's kinship you don't buy." Later, alone in her apartment, Mara Googled him despite herself. Page after page of articles and carefully lit portraits. The boy genius who wasn't a boy anymore, the man whose acquisitions were called rescues by some, raids by others. A recent profile quoted him saying, "I don't fix things, I build new ones." She rolled onto her back and stared at the ceiling. "Do I want to be new?" In the morning, the board meeting began badly and got worse. The conference room at Haven House was a repurposed storage closet with a borrowed fern and a window that offered nothing but a brick wall. The chair, a kind man whose years in higher ed had smoothed his voice into a permanent apology, cleared his throat. "We have to consider, only consider, a merger. The Downtown Wellness Alliance wants our model without us," Mara said. "They want the rooms, the language, the community trust, and none of the mess that made them." "Large organizations bring stability," another board member countered gently. "You're the soul, Mara. They could be the spine." "And Gavin gets to hang our success on his firm's Christmas tree," Mara snapped before catching herself. The board member flinched. "We're on the same side," the chair said. "I know," she inhaled. "I'm sorry, I'm protective." "Good," the chair said. "Protect us by keeping us alive." After 2 hours of pivot talk and euphemisms, they adjourned. In the hallway, the building's custodian stopped her. "Ms. Ellison," he said, his accent softening the syllables. "The school on 187th called. They want a room. I told them to email you. They said they did. Twice." She closed her eyes. The inbox that felt like a rain barrel just after drought. Every drop a crisis. Back at her desk, she stared at Arjun's card until the numbers blurred. Then she typed, "This is Mara Ellison. You said data, not speculation. Data. I'm drowning." He responded in 2 minutes. "Lunch. Today, 12:30, East 20th. Tabla house, private room. Bring your skepticism. I'll bring models. She woke Nora with a voice note that sounded like a dare and a thanks, then changed into her cleanest blouse and the dark slacks that made her feel like an adult in the genre she'd accidentally entered. Tabla house was crowded without feeling full. Impossibly, it smelled like restraint and cinnamon. A host ushered her into a minimalist room where a long table had been stripped to bone-white surfaces. Arjun was alone, sleeves rolled, a slim laptop open to a dashboard. He stood when she entered, and the old-fashioned courtesy made her want to sit straighter. "I warned you about models," he said. "Models are fine," she replied, "as long as they meet people eventually." "They will." He gestured to a chair. "Eat while I talk. My assistant will kill me if you don't. Then you can ask me questions until I regret inviting you." He had a plan. Of course he did. A 3-year funding arc, escalating with metrics she found both precise and human. He didn't say impact. He said, how many kids breathe easier this month? He didn't say scalability. He said, which neighborhoods will trust us next? Her skepticism, which had arrived with a sword, set it slowly down. "I have 2 non-negotiables," Mara said when he paused. 1. No photo ops that exploit crisis. 2. No naming rights. I'm not plastering your last name on spaces meant to feel like a friend's living room. "Agreed," he said without drama. "I'm selfish about very specific things. Credit isn't one." "Then why are you doing this?" she asked. "Really?" He folded his hands, gaze steady. "Because I'm building a network of practical mercy. Because I'm tired of watching anxiety harvest children, and because, full disclosure, this helps me in a separate fight. Your ex-husband's firm is representing a private equity group buying a healthcare chain I want to block. They're using community well-being as cover. I want to show what that actually looks like." Her stomach dipped. "So I'm a chess piece." "You're a partner," he said. "If that feels like a trick, walk away now. I'll still write a check. No strings. But the broader alignment is there. I won't pretend otherwise." He had said the quiet part aloud. She respected that even as irritation flashed through her. "I won't be weaponized," she said. "Then don't be," he replied. "Take my money and build your rooms. Let me point to something real when I argue in rooms I can't invite you into. We can both live with that." She considered. The reality of rent and demand and the way hope dies without dailiness weighed its arguments. He watched her, not pressing. In the end it was simple. Heart-rending calls, unread emails, a school counselor in Washington Heights who had cried on the phone. 3 pilot schools, she said, 2 in the Bronx, 1 in Queens. If results are what you predict in 6 months, we expand. The contract guarantees autonomy. And if Gavin leverages this to hurt us, if your fight with his firm turns us into friendly fire, we're done." "Deal," he said, and extended his hand again, not for the room this time, but for her. She took it. The pilot moved like weather, unfolding whether anyone wanted it to or not. Arjun's people handled logistics with a competence that made Mara feel both relieved and obsolete. Contractors appeared with swatches and acoustical panels. Counselors arrived with training manuals and a gentleness that made her throat tight. On opening day at PS 714 in Mott Haven, there were balloons because a custodian insisted on them, and a bowl of apples because the principal's grandmother believed red drew luck. The room was small but stitched with thought. Soundproofing, textured walls, a dimmer that made the overhead light gentle. A poster read simply, "Breathe here." Mara stood in the doorway and watched the first 6th grader, a boy with a backpack nearly bigger than his hope, step inside and look around like he'd found a lake. "You did this," Nora whispered beside her. "We did this," Mara said. And then, because honesty was a habit she was still learning to carry, she added, "Arjun did this." Almost as if summoned, he appeared behind them, no security detail, sleeves rolled again. He looked around and nodded, not at the finishings, but at the teacher kneeling to speak to a girl at eye level. "This will work," he said quietly, more to himself than to them. "This will work." The first press request arrived a week later, then 3 more. Mara deflected the ones that felt like fishing expeditions and accepted the 2 from outlets that actually reported. The articles were respectful. One mentioned her divorce in a single breezy clause, irrelevant fact as spice. She ignored the sentence and focused on the photo, a child breathing. The internet, of course, added commentary, some supportive, some cruel. Then Sloane texted, "We should talk. Coffee? I'm not your enemy." Mara stared. She had not given Sloane her number. Manhattan, however, redistributed such things like gossip and napkins. "Why?" Mara typed. "What do you want?" "To not feel like a cliché," Sloane wrote, "meet me at Perch on 10th, tomorrow 8 to or." Nora said don't go. Arjun said ask for a public table and leave first. Mara went anyway because curiosity and anger share a motor. Perch was all cement and plants and beautiful people pretending to be casual. Sloane wore a trench coat over something architectural. She stood when Mara arrived, lips bare of their usual lacquer, and looked for a blink, young. "Thank you," Sloane said. She didn't waste time. "Gavin thinks this thing with Meta is a stunt. He told his mother it'll fizzle when the cameras get bored." "Your boyfriend has many thoughts," Mara said coolly. Sloane's mouth twisted. "Let's stop pretending Gavin is anyone's boyfriend. He's a firm in loafers." A waiter placed 2 coffees. Sloane waited until he retreated. "Look," she said, leaning in, lowering her voice. "Eleanor is arranging a donor salon next month. Quiet, private, old money. You're not invited. They plan to pitch a wellness advisory initiative that looks suspiciously like your work, without you. If they succeed, your board will fold." Mara's breath stalled. "Why are you telling me?" "Because I'm tired," Sloane said, and for the first time the polish cracked. "Because when I started at the firm, I thought proximity to power would make me someone. Instead, I'm collecting other people's sins like souvenir spoons." "That sounds like a redemption arc rehearsed in the mirror," Mara said, checking her temper. "Maybe," Sloane conceded. "Or maybe I'm just a person who sees another person being dragged and decides to say something." "Price?" Mara asked. "There's always a price." Sloane smiled without joy. "Privacy. If I give you a copy of their deck, you didn't get it from me. Also, you stop posting those poems on your non-profit's Instagram. They're earnest. Donors hate earnest." "Noted," Mara said, though she had no intention of scrubbing the poems her mother loved. "Send the deck." That night, an email arrived from an anonymous account. The deck's title, Community Calm TM, a scalable wellness footprint. Slide 2, a photo of a quiet room stolen from Haven House's website, the watermark clumsily cropped. Slide 6, talking points about no names, no drama execution. Slide 10, proposed advisors, including Eleanor Darden. Mara forwarded it to Nora with a string of words that churches don't endorse. Then she texted Arjun. "We need to talk, they're coming." His response, "Good, I'm tired of defense, let's go on offense." Going on offense, it turned out, looked like strategy sessions in Arjun's glass-walled conference room with a view of the river that made the city seem like a chessboard and the people small enough to move easily. Mara hated it on sight and then hated herself for hating it. The coffee was absurdly good. The staff were disarmingly kind. Arjun's general counsel, a woman named Pilar with eyes like a cross-examination, spread the stolen deck across the table. "Cute," she said. "Trademark symbol and everything." "They'll argue it's a generic concept," Mara said. "Anyone can create a quiet room." "Anyone can build a barn," Pilar replied. "Not everyone can run a farm. We don't sue salons. We starve them." "Meaning?" Arjun asked, though Mara suspected he already knew. "Beat them to the donors," Pilar said crisply. "Publicly and privately. We show up with data and children's drawings. We show that community calm twim is a carcass wrapped in language. The children, Mara said, stomach turning. No names, no faces. Of course, Pilar said, offense flicking. We're not monsters. Sometimes we're mirrors, Arjun murmured. Afterward, walking her to the elevator, Arjun paused. You okay? You're asking if I can do this? Stand up straight while we politicize calm? She met his gaze. I have to be okay. He nodded slowly. I asked because I care, not because I doubt you. Good, she said. The elevator bell chimed. Let's win ugly in order to build beautiful. They did both. In the weeks that followed, Mara spoke in rooms she'd never seen before. Ceilings coffered like wedding cakes, carpets so thick her heels left no sound. She told stories that protected privacy and revealed truth. A boy who learned to name his panic. A teacher who admitted she'd almost quit until she could close a door and count. Arjun stood at the edge of the rooms, an unmoving pillar, absorbing glances and resentment like a lightning rod. Donations trickled, then poured. On a Tuesday, while Mara was at PS 179 testing a new sound system, Nora called with a warning laughter hybrid. Brace yourself. What? You're on page 6. Mara pressed the phone to her ear with a shoulder and failed to remain calm. Tell me you're kidding. I wish, Nora said. Headline, Billionaire Mater's Mystery Muse. The non-profit founder he can't stop twirling. Twirl? Mara whispered. Am I a pastry? The photos from the gala, Nora said. Your ex-husband had no comment. Sloane said, we wish Mara the best in her endeavors, which is PR for we hope she trips. Mara hung up and stared at the children, using the room as if pageantry were a different species. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Hello, she said. Mara, Gavin's voice purred. It's been a while. She closed her eyes, counted backward from 8. What do you want? To save you from yourself, he said. This meta thing, it's not you. You don't play this way. I'm learning, she said. From him? He's poison wrapped in philanthropy. And you're, she asked too sweetly, honey wrapped in a spin class? His breath hissed. You're better than this. No, she said softly, I'm better than you. Silence, then. My mother's hosting a salon next week. Come, we'll make peace. Are you inviting me? She held the phone away to see if the number could be a prank. To the party designed to erase me. It's not like that, he lied briskly. Eleanor wants to help. You could be part of community calm if you're practical. I'm not a template, she said. Enjoy your evening. She hung up before the shakiness in her fingers traveled to her voice. The next day, an internal email at Meta Strategic leaked. It arrived in her inbox from an anonymous burner at 3 a.m. She read it with growing cold. A senior strategist suggested leveraging the Haven House founder's narrative for more favorable coverage against the Darden account. The tone was clinical, the intention naked. She scrolled to the bottom and saw Arjun's sentence. This is delicate. No exploitation. Protect her dignity or walk. It didn't matter. The first half had already done damage. She forwarded it to Arjun with no subject line. He called within minutes. I'm sorry, he said without preamble. That shouldn't have been written. I'll deal with it. You can't unwrite a thought, she said. You said you were selfish about very specific things. Is winning against Gavin one of them? Yes, he said. No apology in the admission. Because his firm kills quietly, because owning them in public limits the harm they do in private. And I am what in this war? She asked. A shield? A storyline with eyes? You're a person I respect, he said. Which is why I sent that line. It's not enough. I know. It's what I have. She leaned against the cool cinder block of the school hallway. Children's laughter filtered through the door, the sound of the world proceeding without her dilemmas. I need a day, she said. No meetings, no interviews, just the rooms. Take it, he said. I'll make sure the world doesn't fall apart for 24 hours. She laughed then, unwisely charmed. Deal. The salon at Eleanor Darden's apartment was an exhibit of taste curated to mimic gentility while declaring conquest. Art hung in arrangements that whispered about provenance. A pianist played Ravel until someone requested something lighter. Sloane, in minimalist white, looked like a swan that had joined a board. Mara stood across the street on Park Avenue with Nora, both wearing black like chaperones of their own ghosts. "You don't have to go in," Nora said, voice low. "I'm not," Mara said. "I'm here to see the people who think invention is their entitlement." Sloane had texted an hour before. Deck updated. Additions, partnership opportunities. Translation: "They're coming for your board. Be ready." "There," Nora said, pointing with her chin. "3 of your board members together, and that's, oh God, Judge Rowan, Eleanor's pet." "Let them have their speeches," Mara said tightly. "We'll have our receipts." Their receipts arrived in the form of Pilar, who marched into the salon like someone who refused to be bored. She carried a folder and an expression that looked almost festive. An hour later, the first donor emerged, looking as if a favorite pair of shoes had betrayed them. Pilar called 10 minutes after that. "We did not stab," she reported cheerfully. "We simply read, in front of witnesses, the section of their deck where they proposed pilfering your model. And then we asked about the stock holdings of 2 new advisors in the acquiring PE firm. No one had fun." Mara exhaled. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Pilar said. "Gavin knows we blocked the easy path. He will choose a messy one." The messy path was an op-ed in a glossy magazine written by a concerned philanthropist about the dangers of emotion-driven non-profits with no accountability. The subtext was a shriek. The photo was Haven House's doorway. Credit, publicly available. Mara didn't sleep that night. She sat on her couch and wrote a response she never sent. At dawn, she went to PS 714 and watched a child trace their breath in a mirror with a dry erase marker. At 9 a.m., Sloane knocked on her office door. "You have a key?" Mara asked, startled, then irritated by her own startle. "I have manners," Sloane said, holding up a paper bag. "And bagels. We're both from the Midwest. We believe in carbs." Mara snorted. "Ohio is not a carb." "Everything is a carb if you love it enough," Sloane said. She sat, uninvited. "I'm leaving the firm." Mara didn't blink. "Because you're good now?" "Because I'm tired of laundering men," Sloane said. "Because Eleanor screamed at me last night in front of a painting worth my salary, and I decided I prefer dignity to discounts." "What do you want?" "A job," Sloane said, smiling in a way that was not their old war. "Not from you, from myself. I'm not here to be hired. I'm here to level the field." She slid an envelope across the desk. Emails, calendars, proof that they moved donors away from you because it amused them to watch you scramble. No payment. Consider it. Restitution. Mara opened the envelope and saw the first email's subject line. Haven House. Please avoid. The sender, Eleanor Darden. Her breath caught. "You'll be roasted," she said. "They'll blacklist you." Sloane shrugged. "There are other lists." "Why?" Mara asked, quieter now. "Why really?" Sloane's eyes shone and didn't spill. "Because I watched you at that gala decide to be bigger than survival. Because I thought if I helped you tip a table, I might stop hating my reflection." They stared at each other and, briefly, became something like allies. After Sloane left, Mara called Arjun. He answered on the first ring as if he'd been waiting inside the moment. "Let's end this," she said. "Not with fire, with light." The board meeting convened in the hall of a school that smelled like pencils and cauliflower. The room was full: press, parents, teachers, donors, those who had decided to witness because they'd decided to care. Mara stood at a lectern that had once held vocabulary lists. She told the story of Haven House in plain speech, as if each word needed permission to remain. She spoke of the first room, a janitor's closet in a middle school where a counselor had cried because someone had finally valued the kind of quiet that keeps people from leaving. She didn't mention Gavin's name. She didn't mention Eleanor's. She mentioned the emails, printed, masked for privacy, projected, and the pattern they revealed, the starving of a non-profit not because it failed, but because it refused to be owned. Arjun stood to one side, hands clasped, not the center, but the edge that keeps the center from fraying. When she finished, Mara invited dissent. A donor stood. "How will you ensure accountability?" he asked, polite spine glinting. "With data," Mara said, "and with stories from the people who use the rooms, shared on their terms, not yours, not mine, theirs." A woman in scrubs raised a hand. "I almost quit teaching," she said. "Then I sat in that room and remembered how to be a person before I was a teacher again." She looked at the donors without malice. "That's accountability." A child's mother spoke next, then a school cop who said the fights had less blood in them lately, then a teenager who, with a courage that made the air change color, said he'd thought about not being here, and then sat in a room until the thought shrank. Reporters took notes like they were thirsty. Then Gavin entered, late, jaw set, Eleanor behind him like a scent. He didn't ask to speak. He assumed it. "This is theatrics," he said, gesturing as if conducting. "I admire the impulse, but we need structures." "We built structures," Mara said calmly. "You tried to sell them without us." Eleanor's smile was a winter thing. "My dear, perhaps if you had been more amenable we could have worked together." "I am a non-profit, not a daughter-in-law," Mara said. "Your tools no longer fit this job." A ripple of laughter. It carried something like relief. Gavin's face pinched. "You're burning bridges." "We brought water," Arjun said for the first time, his voice quiet and carryable. He held up a letter, a commitment from a coalition of donors, including 2 who had defected from Eleanor's salon after Pilar's gentle show and tell. 3 years of funding, independent oversight board, community seats, transparency you can read without a law degree. Silence, then applause that began in one corner and grew like a necessary fire. Eleanor's mouth didn't move. Gavin stared at Arjun with loathing that had nothing to do with business. After the meeting in the hallway, Gavin approached Mara alone. "I never meant to ruin you," he said, and for a second the practiced face dropped, and she saw the boy she'd married, scared of the emptiness glitter cannot fill. "You meant to contain me," she said. "It's different." He nodded as if cataloguing that difference hurt. "I had panic attacks," he said suddenly. "In law school. After, too. You saw them. You were kind. I hated you for it, for seeing me, for holding the worst parts while still believing in better." She blinked at the confession, unexpected and oddly tender. "Why didn't you tell me it was that?" "Because shame is a language I'm fluent in," he said. "I'm sorry. Not because of the optics, because it's the word I owe you." "I accept," she said, because carrying refusal had made her bones ache. "And I hope you do better." "I will try," he said. "It's all I trust myself to promise." Sloane slipped past then, sunglasses on indoors because she could. She touched Mara's arm. "You were incandescent," she whispered. "If anyone asks, I was never here." Mara squeezed her hand. "Go make a life." "Working on it," Sloane murmured, and was gone. Arjun waited at the end of the hall, not a rescuer now, but a collaborator, eyes warm in a way that made Mara's heart do something embarrassing. "You were extraordinary," he said simply. "So were the rooms," she replied. "They're the point." He held out his hand, not for cameras, not for headlines, for her. "Walk." She took it. 1 year later, the Hudson made its quiet promise to the city again, as people in good shoes lined the entrance to a new kind of gala. It wasn't at the Whitney or the Met. It was at PS 714, where the auditorium had been transformed without betraying itself. Paper cranes threaded between stage lights, student art lining the walls like a chorus, a string quartet from the neighborhood school filling the room with borrowed Mozart. There were donors, yes, and reporters, some confused by the absence of caviar. There were teachers in slightly wrinkled dresses and janitors in their best shirts. There were parents with strollers and teenagers with eyeliner, and an old woman who slapped Arjun's shoulder and said, "You eat? You look skinny." He laughed like someone's grandson. Mara, in a dress she'd bought on sale because she liked how it let her move, stepped onto the stage to the kind of applause that always startled her because it was a sound she did not build. She waited until it calmed into a listening. "We're here to celebrate spaces," she said. "Not rooms, not logistics, not line items. Spaces where people remember they belong to themselves. When we started, we believed something we couldn't prove. Today, we can prove it a little." She gestured to the screen behind her, where graphs that weren't abstract, attendance up, fights down, referrals caught earlier, sang their quiet song. Then drawings appeared, lopsided hearts, careful stars, a cartoon dragon breathing flowers. She paused to let the laughter find its place. "We did this together," she said. "And tonight is not about me or donors or headlines. It's about the fifth grader who told me the room feels like a friend. It's about the teacher who said she remembered why she stayed. It's about the city we're building on purpose." Applause again. The quartet slid into something bright. Arjun stepped onto the stage, not touching the microphone, place-taking while the noise thinned. "Ms. Ellison forgot to say that she's utterly terrible at accepting thanks," he said to laughter. "So I'll do it for her. Thank you." He lifted a hand, and the lights dimmed a little. A short video played, stitched together by students in a media program Arjun had insisted on funding. It was messy and perfect. It ended with the words, "We breathe here." When the lights rose, Arjun and Mara stood side by side. He looked at her like a man who could finally imagine living without armor. "Dance?" he asked, and the room made a soft, happy noise. Mara laughed, the sound free of the ache that had once lived in it. "Let them say what they will," she said. "We'll build rooms too." They stepped down from the stage and onto the floor, and this time when they turned, no one clapped because no one had to. The music carried them. Gavin stood in the back, hands in pockets, and nodded once to himself before slipping out unnoticed. Sloane arrived late on purpose, hair shorter, eyes clearer, and leaned against the doorframe like a person who had chosen a better edge. Outside, the city crosshatched its own story. Inside, under paper cranes, people who had almost given up learned how to stay. Mara rested her head against Arjun's shoulder for the length of a breath, then lifted it, eyes bright with the understanding that redemption is a verb, and belonging is a practice, and love is not a rescue, but a room you build daily, together. He didn't save her, she didn't save him. They saved what they could, and it was enough to change a city one quiet at a time. If this story held you, if you felt the sting of a whispered insult, the rush of an unexpected hand, the relief of a room where you could finally breathe, then you know what Mara learned. Power is loud, but dignity endures. Love doesn't rescue, it rebuilds. Arjun didn't fix her. She wasn't his project. Together they chose the work over the theatre. Sloane chose a mirror that told the truth. Even Gavin chose to speak the word sorry and start again. If you'd like more stories with messy people, real stakes, and endings that earn their light, tap like, share this with someone who needs a quiet room today, and subscribe for the next chapter in this channel's world of human-scale drama. Your support helps these stories find their people, and maybe builds a few rooms of calm in the process. Thanks for listening. I'm glad you stayed till the end.